I think it's important that we go back and say that you worked with us in command for maybe about 6 months or so and had an occasion to go into the most volatile industry that may be on the planet today, and that's the communications industry. And I think it's appropriate to mention that you're currently with MCI, one of the biggest, and certainly now that it's been bought out, it is, I think, one of the biggest of its kind in the world. And if I may say that when you first started there were some probationary challenges. You weren't exactly what they were looking for, okay? And yet, not too long ago, you were flown to England and identified in a certain way. Do you mind getting into that?
Oh,
what you've accomplished in that environment?
You bet. And the accomplishment genuinely comes through you, frankly. I've said often to my students, as I have become a trainer amongst their corporation, and then a developer of training material for other trainers across the nation, that I would readily trade what I had as an academic background, all my college education, for the 8 verbal essays that you presented to me, the insights, the tools that led me through and beyond fears and that sense of uncertainty, how to function, instead of just always rely upon the cheerleading sessions that we're so exposed to in the business world. We have lots of good cheerleaders, it's just you have very few tools, or the business world has very few tools with which to function. And in doing that, I first learned of MCI as an opportunity, and indeed it is the most volatile industry we have in our planet today. It used to be the space industry and medicine, and that's all changed now. And they required that people come in through the front door in entry-level positions in customer service and or in telemarketing. In Sacramento, they had a major customer service center with about 500 people at the time, grew to about 700. And my skill, my function was to receive the customer concerns and help them resolve any concerns or questions they had and bring to them absolute certainty that they had the best savings possible and help adjust their tools or services through us that would allow them that maximized savings. And of course to do that in a way that calms and reassures them so they don't feel confused or uncertain what to do, how to use what we have to offer. In that, I found some interesting statistics, and my senior manager actually helped me find them without my looking too closely. And what he said was, Stephen, you're talking too long to our customers. You're with them too long. He said, you're being real nice, it's just you're not being as productive as we need you to be. So I re-examined, using the life formula that you had described to me, how can I use the skills of listening and do the adjustments to my manner, my scripting, my functioning, my attention to the details, acute, keen listening to their needs and concerns, and then bring that swiftly into an efficient response and resolve what they really need to happen. Well, it went under the attention of one of our supervisors. She examined what was actually happening, found, much to her surprise and my manager's surprise and senior manager's surprise, that as I was speaking, about a third beyond, about 30% beyond what other people were to our customers, which is not as best as it ought to be. And yet I was selling more than 300% what the other customer service people were selling. So of course they were not 300% beyond what the others were selling, which was very fortunate. I was grateful of that. And so they weren't complaining of that. The issue was I was able, because of his urging, my senior manager, to trim and make efficient what was already a caring environment for me and a purposeful, attention to the customer's needs. And shortly thereafter, about 5-6 months after that point, I had a very unusual circumstance. My supervisor wasn't speaking much to me. I thought, there's something dreadfully wrong here. I need some coaching. Help me, Urge me, bounce me off the wall so I can at least go in the direction you need. And I found out much later, in fact, at an awards banquet, that I was an invited guest, that I had won not only the top in the sales, also the top in the quality evaluations and judgments that had been placed in our environment simultaneously. And it was the first time within MCI's history that that had occurred.
How many people were involved?
In the nation, we have 60,000 employees in the customer service world, and it was pretty remarkable. I was quite fortunate.
It's easy to escape that. In other words, what we're saying is out of 60,000 communicators, representatives, you were the top productive salesperson and top quality. Quality what now? Expand on that.
Quality is
sensitivity or solving problems, or what does that mean, quality communication?
It was the evaluation of the customer's perspectives, actually. We do, and after a customer calls in to our company for service and questions and answers, we actually call them back and ask them what they experienced. Did it meet their needs? In what degree did it meet their needs? And what could they suggest? How were they received by me? Were they finding their issues resolved? And was it courteous and gracious and moving? And did they feel more competent using what we provide them? All of these sorts of questions. And that evaluation was compiled as a review of my skills in that format, in that arena. Now, the first ever to have happened shocked me, frankly, because I keep thinking, you know, I was raised in the Midwest in North Dakota, and that's what you do. You're always aiming for that kind of harmony, that kind of building together and synergy of your life and career. And to have seen the first time someone had the highest quality and sales simultaneously was the remarkable piece. Now, that isn't necessarily the highest of the scores through all those 60,000. In our area, our region here, that was my task. Yet, the first time it had happened among those 60,000, which aggravates me again because we know that it's a doable thing, yet most of our lives, most of our young lives as youth or children and youth, we hear people on television berating the sales professional, making it an unnoble, seemingly unnoble profession. And I beg to differ with that one, because you can carry an integrity and a sense of purpose and delivery that far outstrips other professions in their integrity, their genuineness and contribution.
I've always felt, not always, but certainly for the last, quarter century or more, that the sales division, the salespeople were the conscience of the company, whether the public realizes that or not. Is the salesperson, for example, that came back and said, hey, these typewriters have got to be corrected. And so they did the very best they could. They slowed the typist down. You know what I mean? It's the salespeople who come back and say, we need better service, we need more quality. And I don't think the public recognizes that all the time. And to have the top quality communicator, and I know that means sensitivity and consideration, guilelessness. We're talking love here, for what you're doing and for the people you're doing it with and for, can create extraordinary sales. I know time and time again, you've been paralleled by other people in the community who've enjoyed 300% and 400% increase in their sales. And I don't mean 300% or 400% of nothing. That doesn't mean much. But when you have someone who already is doing a substantial job, exceeding, and then able to multiply that by 300% and 400% because of some of these tools, that's exciting. Now, you wish everybody could grab that, but the fact is that when it happens occasionally and it's evidenced this way, it's very exciting.
Very exciting. And yet I do know that I don't find myself a remarkable person. I think of myself as similar to most of the folks I meet. Nearly all of them. Occasionally there's a grouch who's a rare person, although insistent upon being a grouch, and they just don't want to shake that off in order to move beyond it. And those folks tend to get in their own way. I certainly am not better than they, and it's just a matter of time and a little coaching perhaps, or some discovery on their part that might make it easier for them to digest what I'm up to.
Something else I've heard too, that you went on into training because of how you distinguished yourself. And you've been at a meeting recently, I think, where they asked who listened, who made a difference in your career. And people from all over the country had one person's name on their lips. Can you go through that? If you don't mind, a little self-aggrandizement.
Okay. It's time to blush. I know. I can feel it. It was an unusual experience. And why it came to my attention was because several of our center, the Sacramento Center, is one among 12. And each of the centers in the nation have about 6 to 8 people who are their core management team, a director and then senior managers and managers that keep things running and watchful of the things that might need urging or improvements, and then getting it done. In this group, they were all hosted to a special gathering of them for professional development among this team from all the centers in the nation in customer service. And I learned afterwards that they had brought me up, accidentally, I guess, from my perspective, and they were asked what they knew of listening. And a person who was a genuine, attentive, keen listener, someone who cared enough to go through the listening, the hearing process, to truly, truly care, to bond, to connect. And apparently there were people throughout the room from several different centers who had written on their sheet only one name. They had asked them to come up with a cluster of people and I happened to be on it. And I attribute that to what you had taught me, Bern, about rearticulation, where as someone speaks to you, spouse, youngster, youth, a child in your family, other relatives, neighbors, someone you're in a romance with, someone that you're intending as a spouse, co-workers, people who have gone through more experience, more promotion than yourself or ourselves, that we listen to them repeating like a split or even a microsecond beyond what they're speaking, those exact words inside our minds, to reestablish those words inside of us deeply and listen richly to that person and what they're saying, and that way get it. Let it sink into ourselves and have a chance to truly let them know you're not just waiting with bated breath to jump in, to interrupt what they're trying to share. And apparently, several among these people had enough exposure to my activities that they had brought that up. I was quite shocked.
Yeah, it's fascinating. One of the things, I don't know if we've talked about it here or not, but if indeed a person will truly listen, rearticulate, focus, be with that person and what they're saying, and wait and until they stop talking, and then keep listening. Just wait, keep listening. People will start talking again and reveal more perhaps, and you listen, rearticulate, and wait, and then they stop talking and you remain quiet, and they'll start talking again and find their spirit. Find their spirit. In other words, I remember one evening some time ago, I did a socioeconomic review in a home, and I was asking these questions, and the husband was just doing it. He was really answering the questions and thinking and pondering over and trying to be really fulfilling in all this. And I was writing notes, and I bet we took an hour and a half on what would be a 20-minute interview. And when I made a conversion and said, based on what I've heard and felt this evening, I'd like to invite you to consider coming to some live performances that we do in connection with this, he said, oh yes, I fully intend to. I just need to know how much to pay you. You know what I mean? In other words, he had done it all by himself.
Yes.
I never made a presentation. I just invited him to consider coming, and he did. And his wife said, I don't understand what happened here this evening. I've never heard you talk this much, And I, in a moment of terrible faux pas, I said, well, maybe no one's been listening. You know, but I mean, it went okay. I mean, and she said, well, yeah, you're probably right. You know, I mean, she took it, you know. But as soon as I said it, you know, you figure, whoa, I made a mistake that I could lose everything. But no, she understood. But truly, sometimes we don't listen, and so the people in our lives never find out who we are. Now, I want to jump in on this one. Many times I've talked about this, and there wasn't as many as, I mean, there was more than I had thought. I've been saying 3, possibly 4 women in this community. How long have you lived here now? 5, 6 years?
6 years.
6 years. Yeah. 3, 4 women I've been saying, and now you tell me it's 5. 5 women who have become acquainted with Stephen, have requested that he be present at their baby's birth. And their husbands evidently agreed because you were there, right?
Yes.
Isn't that extraordinary? And what it was about is that they wanted your love in the presence of their child when it entered the world. That's pretty powerful. And it comes from what? From listening.
It does.
Yeah.
And actually in the presence of their husbands, so that they could strengthen their own commitment to that same kind of attention, that same kind of nurturing, that same kind of courage to take the risk, to appear foolish, to be human enough to be vulnerable. I call it being a jar of pickles.
A jar of pickles.
And it's exactly as you've always taught me, to take the risk to make adjustments, to move beyond survival into a contributive experience, a contributive manner. And that's almost always risky because we're so very afraid of some death threat that jumps into our life.
Oh, and it takes time and energy.
It does.
To really be contributive, you got to spend more time and expend more energy, but you know, the value of it and the reward from it is exponential.
Yeah.
It goes beyond what you'd ever anticipate otherwise. It's kind of like, I remember we talked years ago about if you really want to progress in the world, okay, and be fulfilled and happy and what have you, to find volatile places to function. You know, where there's chaos and confusion and agitation and upset, and jump in there, you know what I mean, and calm it and contribute to the solution, and you will be elevated by the environment. You know what I mean? And that's essentially what you did at that time in MCI, and I think what you do with these women and their lives and their children, yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Pretty fascinating. What else has happened? Oh, they just sent you to London recently, I understand? And
yes, quite an experience. I'd never been out of the country in the European part of our world. I'd been to South Central America, graced by awards from that industry in the scuba diving world, to be amongst those peoples and cultures. And recently they brought the 100 top performers in the nation of MCI to London, England, which was pretty amazing experience, and a chance to explore, daily tours and special awards every single evening. A gift of remarkable quality and care, thoughtfully placed on our hotel beds. You know, just to say again, thank you for going far, far beyond, for taking the time, the energy, the concern, taking the mission to heart and letting it move through your breath, through your thoughts, through your walk, through your talk, and on an ongoing basis saying thank you in that major way. It's a wonderful experience. None of us returned home unaffected, deeply affected we were, and a chance to see things that many of us would not be able to see for many years to come.
I may be edifying you or deifying you even, but do you remember a story you told me about a young boy on the American River bike path that had a difficulty and you attended him? Would you tell me about that again? Because I want to re-articulate the story, and I've forgotten some of the details, but I bet you remember.
Oh, I do.
What was that about?
I'll never forget that. I was bicycling through the city one early morning, actually, as I typically do. Love the bicycle. And was pedaling through a park area along the riverside of the Sacramento River, American River and Sacramento River, and came upon a cluster, 3 young boys and their bicycles. 2 of them were upright and one was collapsed down on the ground, and it looked like someone was crying. One of the youngest of the 3 lads was crying. I'd suspect probably 7.5 to 9 years old. And he just was in a bad way, unhappy, in pain. And I screeched to a halt, and it was a downhill screech with sand and whatnot. So it was a little bit awkward. You know, there's a shifting that goes on, and you think, whoa. And so I stopped there and said, "Are you okay?" And the other two boys were about to leave. They were taking off on their bikes. And I said, "No, come on back here. Let's check on this fellow, make sure he's okay." It turned out that two of them were brothers. One was a good buddy in the neighborhood nearby. And the youngest of them had gotten his foot snagged in the spoke, or not in the spokes, but in the gears and the chain. And he was cut badly. Not badly enough to require stitches. I've had a bit of exposure in the hospital world, working my way through college and as an orderly, so I knew it wouldn't require stitches. So we're okay that way. But he was in grave pain emotionally. He was frightened. It was bleeding, and this hadn't happened to him before. And it was quite a surprise. And he'd fallen off his bike, and all of the scene was rough. And it turned out that I didn't have any change or cash on me. I was out biking. It was a recreational time, and to get a cab to get him home. And so I thought, well, what's the next best thing? I couldn't think of anything. I put him on my back and carried him. And eventually, he got too tired, his arms holding around my neck. The other two boys were holding their bicycles, and I managed to carry both my bicycle and this young lad's as well with my free arms. And we proceeded over the bridge into West Sacramento, and they said they just lived a little bit over there. It turned out it was about 2.5 miles away that we walked through the city with these three lads. And the amazing part of it was their lives started to unfold as I asked them questions and tried to see what might be more important than just gruffly walking on home. Some way to see that they were really okay and they could take care of this young boy next time he stumbles or whatnot. Turns out that their family, both of the parents of these two were in just a drunken spree, I guess, at the time, and were screaming and hollering at these two boys when we finally did get them home. And awkward situation, but a happy acquaintance that I hope I certainly know it's affected my life for the better, and I hope will be a good chance.
How far was that?
Them.
2.5, 3 miles? And you carried him all the way?
Yes.
Yeah. I know there was something about you tore off a T-shirt and bound his feet, too.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
But see, that takes time and energy, to extend yourself. And it's just such a pride in knowing someone who's grasped things and runs with them in the way that you have. That's really fascinating. What do you have to admonish our listeners about, or reviewers, as to what they might do or how they might respond or listen to or whatever? I mean, anything you can do to help us assist them.
I'd say the initial fundamental thing is to ask ourselves, as you have taught me, am I about to die right now? Right now, this very breathing moment. If not, to make the adjustments, the contributions, the sense of lovingness in ways that will allow us to step through the fears that we all have. We're all plagued by them, hobbled by them, impinged upon by them. And yet taking that look, am I about to die now? And usually the answer is no. Usually. Good fortune, we're pretty much no. Then make the next step into that love mode you've taught, all of us on your programs, to function in ways that make a contribution rather than just give in to survival. Instead of hunkering down, gosh, crickets and lizards do that.
Yeah, exactly. Or react.
Yes. Yeah. And then move through to those behaviors.
I think what this next week, perhaps, if you can make arrangements to come back for another couple of shows, we can kind of delve into those various essays, and perhaps you can report what you've gleaned and how you've applied that, so that they can better understand the material we cover in the show, is not flippant and thrown off, you know, without a lot of thought and a lot of research, a lot of care, and a lot of concern. Sometimes I think people surfing by think, well, that's an infomercial, or what are they up to? And it's much more than that. I mean, we have actually communicated our life's work on this access cable. We haven't held anything back. Now, granted, in order to get it, it would take, what, we've been on here 2 years or more? and you can get it in about 8 weeks, 8 or 9 weeks, and start really practicing it. And some of the things that we do, that once people have gone through what we do, they can audit over and over and again. Like, for example, how many times have you seen Life Formula?
It's going on now 19 times.
19. We've been reporting 22. So that's the way salespeople are. They just exaggerate, stretch the truth. Yeah. I know Diane Barnes, one of our camera people, has seen it in excess of 40. And I've seen it work in her life. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, many, many times when things were really difficult, and yet she wasn't overly challenged at all, just managing it. And that's pretty exciting. And the crew on this show, I mean, week in and week out, you know, without any consideration, come here and do the job. And that's pretty astounding.